Welcome, deep divers. Get ready, because today we're plunging headfirst into some truly dramatic shifts, things that are reshaping the very foundation of America's borders and identity.
Absolutely. It's happening fast.
Yeah, I mean, just recently, the Trump administration launched this sweeping review. We're talking over 55 million valid U.S. visa holders. That's just a staggering number.
55 million. It's hard to even picture.
And it's not just talk, right? Thousands of these visas, including more than 6,000 student visas, have already been revoked.
And the reasons cited.
Officials are pointing to things like, law violations, overstays, or even terrorism-related concerns.
Right. Security is definitely a major theme here.
At the same time, President Trump signed an executive order. This one specifically targets birthright citizenship for children of illegal immigrants.
That's a huge one. It's kicking off a massive legal fight.
Exactly. It's not just sparking debate. It's really igniting a national showdown in the courts. These shifts, well, they signal a new era in America's immigration policy. Right. The focus is sharply on national security and the rule of law.
A very clear direction.
So from tightening borders to maybe fundamentally redefining citizenship, America's immigration landscape is undergoing its most significant shift in decades. It's sparking these urgent questions about national security, the economic impact, and, frankly, who truly belongs.
Big questions.
So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack the history here, how U.S. immigration law evolved. We'll look closely at the Trump administration's bold new enforcement policies.
And that intense debate around birthright citizenship, too, plus the future of our workforce.
Exactly. You'll get a clear understanding of what's happening, why it matters, and, the potential ripple effects across the whole nation. Okay, let's unpack this.
Sounds good. What's fascinating, I think, is how these recent actions fit into this much longer history of how the U.S. has managed who comes in and, well, who become a citizen.
Right. It didn't just appear out of nowhere.
No. For much of the 18th and 19th centuries, the U.S. basically had what some might call an open border policy. That often surprises people.
Yeah, you don't usually think of it that way.
But even back then, citizenship wasn't, universal. The Naturalization Act of 1790, it initially limited it to free white persons.
Okay.
And by 1802, a 5-year residency requirement was already in place.
So even when the physical borders were maybe more permeable, the legal definition of who could become an American was pretty narrow, pretty specific from early on.
Definitely. And control over immigration itself. That wasn't always a federal thing, was it?
Good point. It started much more locally.
Exactly. At first, rules and procedures were handled right at the local ports of entry or sometimes by individual state laws. But over time, the federal government kind of took over. A key moment was the Immigration Act of 1891. That really centralized control.
1891. What did that do specifically?
Well, that act established the U.S. Bureau of Immigration. And it led to the opening of, the famous Ellis Island inspection station in 1892.
Right, Ellis Island.
Yeah. That was a crucial step towards a more unified federal system.
That history paints a picture of, constant evolution. But what we're seeing today, it feels like more than just another step. It feels like a really dramatic reevaluation of who comes in, how they stay, especially with this new level of enforcement from the Trump administration.
It does feel different in intensity.
So the federal government took control, but how did the philosophy behind enforcement change, particularly after 9/11? That seems like a huge turning point.
Oh, absolutely. After the tragic events of 9/11, the entire framework just shifted dramatically. In 2003, the old Immigration and Naturalization Service, the INS, it was completely reorganized.
Broken up, right?
Totally. Its functions were split into new agencies under the brand new Department of Homeland Security, DHS. So that's when we got U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS for the legal applications. Then Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, for internal enforcement.
And CBP at the border.
And U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, yeah, for border security. This whole reorganization clearly showed a much, much bigger focus on national security. It permeated everything.
Right. So with that history, that evolving control, and this new post-9/11 security mindset, let's look at today's enforcement. The Trump administration has brought, a new level of scrutiny. Their goals seem pretty clear.
Yeah. Enhanced border security, stop unauthorized entry, increase deportations. It's very direct.
But one of the most striking actions, I think, is this continuous vetting of valid visa holders. Yep. That's a massive policy shift, isn't it?
It really is. It's a significant expansion of government oversight. The State Department confirmed it. Over 55 million people holding valid U.S. visas.
Tourists, students, workers.
Everyone. From tourists on vacation, students getting an education, to long-term workers who are part of our economy, they're all now subject to continuous vetting.
What does that actually mean day to day? Continuous vetting.
It means their records can be re-examined at any time without warning. Even if their visa was initially approved, no problem.
Wow, so a visa isn't really a final okay anymore. It's more like conditional.
You could kind of see it that way. It fundamentally shifts the premise. If new information pops up, maybe they overstayed, maybe some criminal activity, a public safety threat, even suspected links to terrorism,
Then what?
that visa can be immediately revoked, just like that. And if the person's already here, in the U.S., they could face immediate deportation.
That must create a lot of uncertainty for, say, an international student trying to plan years of study or a business traveler.
Absolutely. It introduces this layer of, ongoing uncertainty. It impacts long-term planning. It probably impacts international relations, too, as other countries watch these changes.
So it's a fundamental change in the relationship between the visa holder and the U.S. And authorities are looking at everything: law enforcement data, immigration records, social media.
Yes, reportedly reviewing all available information, including social media activity, to determine if someone is still eligible to keep that visa.
And this isn't theoretical. This expanded scrutiny has already led to thousands of visa revocations. You mentioned over 6,000 student visas just recently.
And we're seeing this scrutiny really focused intensely on specific areas. The administration has definitely ramped up a crackdown on universities. They're directly linking it to national security concerns.
How so?
Well, over 500 international student visas were revoked, specifically for involvement in campus protests and distributing materials tied to pro-Hamas activities.
Okay.
And DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin was very clear. She said, quote, "There is no room in the United States for the rest of the world's terrorist sympathizers, and we are under no obligation to admit them or let them stay here."
Strong words.
And that policy includes screening social media for what they term anti-Semitic content.
So that connects activism, social media posts, and visa status incredibly directly. Do we have like a specific example of this happening?
Yeah, there was the case of Mahmoud Khalil. He's a Syrian national, a Columbia University graduate student. He was detained by ICE agents for leading what authorities called violent protests.
So immediate real-world consequences.
Definitely shows how these policies are being enforced on the ground.
Okay, so beyond students, there's also this clear focus on protecting American jobs. What's happening there?
Right. Another major move. The U.S. government stopped issuing work visas for commercial truck drivers, effective immediately.
Commercial truckers. Why them specifically?
Well, Secretary of State Marco Rubio argued that the rising number of foreign drivers was, in his words, endangering American lives and undercutting American truckers.
So safety and economics.
Exactly. The Transportation Department backed this up. They citing road safety concerns, issues with limited English proficiency being a factor in fatal accidents. It's framed as directly addressing American worker concerns and public safety.
That certainly makes a strong case for protecting American jobs and, road safety. But are there potential downsides? Like, if you abruptly stop visas in a sector that maybe relies on foreign labor, could that cause problems?
That's a really crucial consideration. I mean, while the goal is to protect domestic workers, these kinds of abrupt shifts can definitely create labor gaps, especially in industries that have become structurally reliant on these workers.
Right.
And that could lead to other economic pressures down the line. It's a complex balance.
It really is. These policy shifts, they certainly make you think hard about who is considered an American citizen. Which brings us perfectly to our second act, the evolving definition of American citizenship itself.
And the cornerstone, of course, is the 14th Amendment.
Right. Tell us about that.
Okay, so the 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, right after the Civil War, it states, "All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside."
And its original purpose was crucial.
Hugely important for granting citizenship to former slaves. Now, historically, the Supreme Court looked at this in a case called United States v. Wong Kim Ark back in 1898.
Wong Kim Ark. What did that decide?
It applied the 14th Amendment to the child of Chinese citizens who were legally residing in the U.S. when the child was born. So birthright citizenship was upheld for children of legal residents.
But there were exceptions even then.
Yeah, clear exceptions for children of foreign diplomats who aren't fully subject to the jurisdiction, and also for members of Native American tribes at the time who were considered members of separate sovereigns.
Okay, so that's the historical interpretation. But President Trump's administration is now challenging that long-standing view.
Directly. On January 23, 2025, President Trump signed that executive order. It aims to initiate a legal fight against the current interpretation of birthright citizenship, specifically for the children of illegal immigrants.
So the order itself doesn't change the law immediately.
Right. It directs federal agencies to basically create policies that would reinterpret the 14th Amendment's application. The goal is to force the issue into the courts.
And it's not just children of illegal immigrants.
No, it also targets children whose mothers were here lawfully but temporarily. Think student visas, tourist visas, if the father wasn't a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident.
So this is setting up a major constitutional showdown. It could force the Supreme Court to re-examine the whole meaning of subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Exactly. Potentially redefining what it means to be born an American. The administration's argument, essentially, is that the 14th Amendment has, quote, never been interpreted to extend citizenship universally to everyone born within the United States.
How did it justify that reading?
Their claim centers on that phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. They argue it wasn't intended to apply to children of foreigners who deliberately break the law by being here illegally or whose parents fundamentally owe allegiance to another country. It challenges the conventional wisdom.
And this argument has legs in Congress, too.
Oh, yeah. Strong backing. Republican lawmakers like Representative Brian Babin, Representative Andy Biggs, Representative Tom Tiffany, they've introduced legislation to actually write this interpretation into law, to codify the executive order's direction.
What are their main arguments for doing this?
Well, Representative Tiffany, for example, points to what he calls exploitation of a loophole through birth tourism, particularly alleging it happens with individuals from communist China in places like the Northern Mariana Islands. He calls it a national security threat.
Birth tourism as a security threat. Interesting angle.
And Representative Diana Harshbarger added pretty bluntly, quote, the only thing birthright citizenship births is more illegal immigration. So they're framing it very much as national security and stopping incentives for illegal entry.
So, this debate is officially headed to the courts. Could go all the way to the Supreme Court for a final say.
Very likely. The stakes are incredibly high.
These policy shifts will clearly have massive implications, not just for individuals, but for the whole country. Let's dive into Act 3, immigration's economic impacts and the future of our workforce. One sector seems particularly exposed, agriculture.
Definitely. If we connect this back, the U.S. agricultural sector relies heavily on immigrant labor, especially farms growing those labor-intensive crops, fruits, vegetables, horticultural products, also dairies, food processors.
How heavily reliant are we talking?
Estimates suggest that unauthorized immigrants make up over 1/3, maybe more, of our entire crop workforce. They're doing absolutely vital jobs getting food from the farm to our table.
A third of the workforce. Wow. And this isn't new, right? There's history here, too?
Yeah. No, it's not new at all. Remember the Bracero program during World War II? It brought Mexican guest workers legally to the U.S.
Right.
Well, after that program ended in 1964, unauthorized immigration started to rise, and much of the agricultural workforce gradually became Mexican nationals, many without authorization. It's a dynamic that's been building for decades.
Okay, so what are the potential consequences if that labor supply suddenly shrinks because of stricter enforcement?
Well, the economic ripple effects could be significant. Farms would likely face much higher production costs trying to find or pay more for scarce labor. We could see reduced domestic output of those labor-intensive crops. Meaning potentially more reliance on food imports. And for you, the consumer, that could mean less selection at the grocery store and almost certainly higher prices.
Do we put numbers on that?
There are estimates. For example, some experts figure that if you removed all unauthorized immigrants just from California's agricultural sector, farm wages might have to jump by something like 42%.
42%.
Yeah. That kind of increase could potentially drive many farms right out of business, especially smaller ones.
So this isn't just some abstract political debate in Washington. For anyone doing their weekly grocery shopping, these immigration policies could directly hit their wallet, right?
Yeah.
Affect their dinner table.
Absolutely. It's a huge, tangible impact, far from abstract.
Is anything being done? Are there solutions being explored for this potential labor crisis in agriculture?
Well, there are existing programs that are expanding. The H-2A guest worker program, for instance, it's grown massively.
H-2A, how much has it grown?
It went from about 85,000 workers back in 2012 to projections are over 400,000 expected in 2025. So a huge increase.
Is that the solution then?
It helps, but it's not a perfect fix. The H-2A program primarily supports seasonal jobs, and it can be really challenging, especially for smaller farms, because of the upfront costs. Things like providing housing, transportation, navigating the bureaucracy.
So it's complex, not a simple substitute for the current workforce.
Not universally accessible, no, it's part of the picture, but doesn't solve the whole problem easily.
This raises that important question. If we're rethinking unauthorized immigration, even birthright citizenship, what about legal immigration? There seems to be a strong push, particularly from a conservative viewpoint, for a more merit-based system.
Exactly. That's a big part of the conversation. Senator Orrin Hatch, who was a key proponent for years, often argued that rethinking legal immigration isn't anti-immigrant. It's about asking how we best allocate those limited green cards to benefit the nation.
Prioritizing skills and national interests.
That's the idea. And President Trump's 4 pillars framework for legal immigration reform also called for things like ending the diversity visa lottery.
The lottery that gives out 50,000 green cards a year.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Based largely on country of origin. His framework also aimed to revise family-based immigration laws, sometimes called Jane migration, to reduce the number based on more distant family connections, focusing more on spouses and minor children.
Okay, so focusing legal immigration. Senator Hatch had a specific proposal too, right? The I-Squared Act.
Yes, the Immigration Innovation Act, or I-Squared. It specifically proposed increasing high-skilled visas, things like the H-1B for specialized workers and those employment-based green card categories. EB-1 for people with extraordinary ability, EB-2 for advanced degrees, EB-3 for skilled workers.
And making it easier for graduates to stay.
Right. Streamlining the process for international students who graduate from U.S. universities, especially in STEM fields, to get green cards and stay here permanently.
What's the core argument for that kind of shift?
The argument, as proponents like Senator Hatch made, is that America needs to attract and keep the best and brightest to stay competitive globally, instead of educating talented people here and then, sending them home to compete against us.
So reallocating existing green cards towards those high-skilled categories.
That was a key part of his proposal, yes. Using the existing numbers, but shifting the priorities.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, our listener? We've taken a real deep dive today. We looked at the history of U.S. immigration, how it evolved.
Then we explored the dramatic increase in enforcement we're seeing now under the current administration, the continuous vetting, the focus on students, truckers.
Right, and we examined that fundamental constitutional debate over birthright citizenship. Huge implications there.
And analyze the critical economic impacts, especially for agriculture, and what happens if that labor supply changes.
And finally, we looked at those proposals for shifting towards a more merit-based legal immigration system, prioritizing certain skills.
Yeah. And what becomes really clear, I think, is that immigration policy isn't just about lines on a map or rules at the border crossing.
No, it touches everything.
It really does. It touches every aspect of our society, from the fundamental question of who we consider a citizen, to the food that ends up on our tables, to our national security, even our global economic competitiveness. The changes unfolding right now are significant. They reflect this concerted effort to, realign U.S. policies with what the administration sees as national interests and the rule of law.
So as America grapples with all these questions, here's a final thought to leave you with. What unforeseen consequences might these rapid, far-reaching changes unleash? Not just for immigrants themselves, but for the fundamental fabric of American society, and maybe even its global standing in the decades to come.
A really important question to keep thinking about.
Definitely something worth pondering as these policies continue to unfold.